look great.
Yes.
I think so.
I like your scarf.
Thank you. I know it's very bright and poppy. Okay. Welcome, Charley. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. It's, we've only just met, so thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today and to talk to all of the folks that are part of our bookish community around what's going on for you and your fellow booksellers in Texas. So I'd love for you to start at, I know that you've worked really hard to fight the recent bill that unfortunately ended up passing. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that bill is and how it could affect you specifically and the entire country?
Yes, most definitely. Thanks for inviting me to have this conversation. It's definitely something that I do feel like people need to hear in the book industry about how to respond when they are attacked out of the blue, the way that we were. And so HB 900, House Bill 900, which was actually just signed into law by our governor last week, requires book vendors like bookstores, like BookPeople, to identify and label books that are sexually explicit and sexually relevant before selling them to schools, as well as retroactively rating all of the books that were sold in the past and are still in circulation for checkout in school and classroom libraries. Books that are rated sexually explicit cannot be sold to schools, and they must also be recalled from any schools that we've ever sold them to in the past. So our challenge here is that book vendors like bookstores were just not able to comply with the requirements as outlined. For BookPeople specifically, we've been in business for almost 53 years, and we've never been required to keep records of the reasons why books were being purchased, because that really feels like business overreach. And we have no idea how many books we've sold to school districts, much less which ones ended up in circulation for checkout in this model that they're targeting. We also sell books at events like the Texas Book Festival, where educators from across the state come and stock up on signed books for their schools. We have no record of which of those hit libraries, which hit classroom libraries. So where we are is that since we know that we cannot comply with these guidelines as written, the book banners, that's what I call them, they're already looking at who could possibly comply, and that points to the publishers because they're considered content creators in our supply chain. And so while this bill was written for Texas, it affects all book vendors that sell to Texas schools. And it's not just vendors that are located in the state of Texas. So by forcing national vendors to create these rating systems, then it becomes basically the flick of a pen for any other state to sign on for their ready-made rated package. The author of the bill, named Representative Patterson, he called it the model legislation for the rest of the country in his interview with a local news station. So that should really tell you what you need to know about his goal in writing this bill.
So one of the things that really interested me as you were talking is the potential ramifications of the new law. So what happens if you're found to not be complying with this law? What are the ramifications for potential ramifications for you or for potentially publishers?
So in the bill, it stated that we will be fined and we will be banned from working with the entire school district. It doesn't say how much the fine is, and it doesn't say what the banning covers. We don't know if that means if we can do book fairs, because we don't sell books to the schools through the book fair program. We sell to the students. But if we're banned with working with the district, then chances are they're not going to be able to book fairs with us either. It also affects school events, right? We bring authors into schools for events. We will not be able to do that either. So it would really just cut us off from working with all of our school districts moving forward.
This is just mind-boggling.
It's
just absolutely,
it's bonkers.
I have
When I told
stronger
people
language, but
about
yeah.
this, yes, when I told people about this bill when it was first proposed, everybody told me it's a trash bill. And I'm like, but it's not, because it's moving through the process. Trash bills don't move through the process, and this one is.
Wow. Okay, so it's an effective methodology for banning both booksellers and specific book content. And I was wondering if, as my favorite booksellers, if you would mind describing how book banning really harms our communities. I think that's sometimes, implicitly omitted. Like, we just take book banning is bad. We all agree book banning is bad. Yep. But I think your view on that might be very, very useful for all of us.
Sure. I do want to preface this by stating that we also agree that sexually explicit content should not be in schools, right? And so that's not what we're trying to do by saying that we're against this bill. What we're trying to say is that the lack of access to books hurts everyone, period. When a book gets challenged or banned, what that means is someone else is trying to decide what is best for everyone based on their beliefs or their feelings. And no one should have that right for everyone. And it's not just the student that's missing the opportunity to see themselves in a storyline that they might not have seen before. It's also hiding the story and silencing the voice of the person that wrote the book. It's silencing their experience, that they were brave enough and willing to share with others in the hopes of helping them to navigate their own situations, which can seem hopeless to those that are actually living in those situations. David Lenahan, he wrote a great piece for Publishers Weekly at the end of April, outlining the long-term effects of these banning efforts. And I think he really put it very succinctly to the long-term effects, in that the plan to sanitize our public school education and prevent ideological conformity will definitely have grave repercussions on our economy and our society. Banning knowledge that's been identified as potentially causing psychological distress reduces the ability of young people to engage in strategic analysis. And it deprives them of all the skills that are needed to cite arguments, state facts, and empirical evidence to validate their points of view. And such learning curves will create homogeneous and faulty conclusions that will lead to bad decisions in every profession. And I believe this wholeheartedly. I think that this is the goal in the banning of the books. Yeah.
Well, as you know, Charlie, I mean, Sourcebooks is books change lives, so, and I'm here as a publisher. Yeah, exactly. I'm here as a publisher because, of the books I read as a kid and got to read. I'm here as because of the libraries that helped foster that reading. So we're very attached here. I wanted to get your take, and I know that this is a little bit off the conversation we had planned, but I just wanted to get your specific take on what, so I'm an immigrant. So one of the things that and this is known about immigrants, that we all read American history, but not all, but I mean, I've read a lot of American history. Many immigrants do. What's your view on the changes that are being proposed in the telling of American history by the state of Texas? Because I have to imagine that you have a point of view on that.
I mean, It's exactly what I just kind of outlined in what David Lenihan outlined. Their goal is to write history in the way that they want it portrayed, and to silence any kind of uncomfortableness in our history. But the only way to move forward is to sit on the uncomfortableness and learn from it and talk about it to overcome it. And they just don't want to be uncomfortable in any situation.
God, I love that, Charley. I mean, I love in order to move forward, you have to sit on the uncomfortableness. I mean, it's exactly I mean, I think that's so important. You have been dealing with book banning for years. What was your most important learning from fighting either this book ban or some previous ones? Is there something that you're particularly proud of, or something else that you wish you had done? Any of that?
Yeah. I will say the top point that I learned this legislative session is that the legislative arm of our government is not easy to navigate in any fashion. From the winding dead-end hallways of the Capitol to the inability to even find working email addresses to contact our representatives and our governor. I wanted to send a statement to our governor, and I could not find a working email address online. So I reached out to an organization called Mothers Against Greg Abbott, and it's just a local collection of badass mamas fighting to make a change for families, schools, and neighbors. And they don't have his email address. I reached out to a chief of staff of a senator that I was working with. He didn't have the governor's email address. I had to print it out and snail mail my statement to the governor in order to tell him why this bill is not feasible. I learned that when an expert in the field of the bill that is targeted, like a book vendor, testifies about the infeasibility of a bill, they don't listen. I learned that when thousands of people contact their elected officials about how a bill is bad for the community, along with 16 people testifying in person against it, versus 11 people that were for it, and 163 people registering against it, while only 9 people registered for it, that the legislators are going to do whatever that their party is telling them to do. I learned that as hard as you fight and all of the expertise that you share in the field, they can and will choose to not listen. And so what I'm particularly proud of is literally just standing up and testifying against this bill. There were 3 book vendors that testified in person. 2 were from BookPeople, and 1 was from a large bookstore chain. She was not able to say who she worked for. They weren't even willing to pay her to be there, so she took a vacation day to testify. We were the targets of the bill, and there was literally no voice given to the target other than our 3 voices. I don't know what else I could have done at this point. I have literally been fighting this bill since the end of March in some form or fashion. I went to the Texas Librarians Association at the end of March or beginning of April. I got my business cards into the hands of as many publishers as possible. I spearheaded a last-minute panel at a regional conference where a lot of Texas booksellers were in the same room. And fighting this bill actually took precedence over strategic planning for our organization, because booksellers are just people, and we can only do so much.
Well, but I mean, I think it's incredible how much you've done, right? I think you've been a stand for the for the proliferation and the development of books in the state of Texas. I mean, that actually is what we do every day is to work on behalf of readers and on behalf of students, and it's an absolutely extraordinary accomplishment. Um, do you have any lessons that you think that advocates in other states might learn from what you're since it's possible that this is a blueprint model legislation for other states? Is there anything that advocates in other states might learn from your efforts?
I will say that if you find yourself in this position of fighting on behalf of your business due to a legislative attack, the first thing I recommend is to find someone who's gone through this before and connect with them as early as possible. Through this whole process, it was the blind leading the blind. I was reaching out to publishers. I was reaching out to other Texas bookstores, my regional association. I was just asking for help from anyone who would give it. Most of the publishers I reached out to, I'll admit they were the top 5 because I was looking for the people who could afford to take this on. I was able to get a response. The ones I was able to get a response from pushed me to the general counsel at the Association of American Publishers. I was able to get him on a Zoom call with one of our representatives, along with a lot of other community stakeholders in the room in early April. But then afterwards, I was told it was a hyper-local issue that I needed to fight with local allies on. But in my opinion, a bill that attacks all bookstores in a state really shouldn't be considered hyper-local. I hope that the ABA...
Particularly not when it's supposed to be model. I mean, we know how this, we know exactly how this blueprint is going to work, right?
We do. We do. Yes. And I was able to get a meeting with the policy director of the Speaker of the House. And I was in the room and a librarian was in the room. And when they said, can publishers do this? There wasn't a publisher in the room to say they couldn't do it. So I said publishers couldn't do it, but I don't know if they believed me because I'm not a publisher. I just really hope that the ABA is compiling a list of bookseller resources for booksellers who have gone through this and continue to go through these challenges, because other booksellers are gonna need support. This took me away from running my business for so long.
Yeah, and Charley, Skip Dye has done an incredible job over at PRH, which, as you know, is a partner of Sourcebooks, is doing a kind of a very good and very thorough approach for libraries, but we need exactly the same thing for booksellers. We really do. You're absolutely right. We need to kind of, and that was the next question I had for you is, as book ban attempts ramp up, how do you hope to see community members beyond just booksellers and librarians step up to take meaningful action?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that so many people are being attacked legislatively on so many fronts. And so it's really hard to put the onus of this on the community to always know when their access to books is being attacked and what they should do, because everyone is fighting their own battle, including booksellers in our stores are fighting other battles for their identity as well. And so I think that those who are stakeholders in the book community, whether it be monetarily like publishers and vendors like bookstores, or mission-driven organizations like nonprofits that forward literacy, I think they could join together to fight these bans. That 100% includes community calls to action, but we're the experts in our field. We keep up with the trade news every day. So we need to step it up and use our expertise to dissect these attacks, inform our community of how they are being affected by them, and give them straightforward calls to action that are easy. I'm going to give you a perfect example. The Llano County Public Library in Llano, Texas, their county officials called a special meeting to discuss the closure of their library system, and there was less than 3 days notice for their community. If you're a resident in Llano and you're out of town on vacation, or you just like weren't watching the news, how were you supposed to know this? If you were maybe on your local bookseller's mailing list and they sent out an email with one-click option, email your person by clicking this button because this is what's at stake right now. That's where we fit in. It takes a village and everyone has their role, but ours is to protect the access of books for our community of readers. We need to tell them what to do because this is our job.
Do you, again, this is just me asking you, Charley, do you believe that this issue has been well publicized even in Texas? Like, do you think people in Texas know this is happening?
No, and I'm going to say that I'm very disheartened because after the bill was signed, I heard an NPR story about it, and it made it sound positive because they called it like, it's getting rid of all the sexual content in the libraries. And I'm like, y'all don't even really know what you're reporting.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And okay. So whose responsibility is that? My responsibility to reach out to them to educate all the media? Whose responsibility? Now I feel like it's mine because no one else did it. And you're talking about,
it's not yours, but I mean, it's very clearly like, if they, and that's really, because I was thinking about it. So a couple of data pieces that we have is that, well over 2/3 of Americans are against book bans. And I think this can easily be framed as a, just a sideways attempt at book banning. So I don't know that if the number is wildly disproportionate in Texas. I have trouble believing that Texas is 63% for book bans or 67% for book bans. Seems unlikely to me, but we can go and find that out. But it seems to me
this bill has not been marketed as a book ban in any fashion other than by the book vendors. This has been marketed by every legislator as well as media as removing sexual content from school library shelves.
It's a very smart
we all agree. Yes, it is. It's part of their playbook. That's why they're using this as model legislation. It has nothing to do with the color of the skin of the people in the book or their identities. It has to do with sexual content, which everyone can agree explicit material doesn't belong in schools. And that's how they got everyone on board. I agree with that as well. I just don't agree with the way that they're doing. And I know that this is a problem that's a non-problem. They brought up books, titles that are, and they say these are sexually explicit, and none of those are in school libraries. You could pick any book off the shelf and say it's sexually explicit, but that doesn't mean it's in a school library.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, it's always been, sort of one of the hallmarks of the right, is to create non-problems and to make them extreme, right? So that everybody can everybody can agree. This is really very disheartening. Thank you, Charley, for enlightening all of us and also for your incredible effort on this. I mean, I know how much work this was. I can only imagine, and it's going to continue to be work. So thank you for both the work you've already put in and the work I suspect you will continue to put in. So thank you so much for speaking.
You're so welcome. And to tell you that this is one of those things where I didn't even feel like there was an option. This came up and I'm like, we can't not do this. I didn't see on any other path. Yeah.
Totally agree. Thank you so much for your time. And we will send over the clips and all the materials to you so that you can share far and wide, and look forward to seeing you when I'm next in Austin. Take good care.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.